Welcome to the Still City Recovery Podcast, your beacon of hope and support on the journey to recovery from addiction. Whether you're contemplating a life free from substance dependency or are already on the path to sobriety, this podcast is here for you. Each episode, we're going to dive deep into the stories and experiences of individuals who have walked the road of recovery, alongside expert insights from mental health professionals and addiction specialists. Our mission is simple: to provide you with valuable tools, resources, and a supportive community to help you navigate the challenges and celebrate the victories of your recovery journey. So grab a seat, open your heart, open your mind, and let's embark on this transformative journey together. This is Steel City Recovery. Okay, so here we are on the third episode of Steel City Recovery podcast. And we find ourselves in September, which is Addiction Recovery Month, and that's a national campaign to raise awareness about recovery. So we're recording two podcasts this month, and our first guest is Stu. And Stu joins us today to share his experience of how it was in addiction, how it is today in recovery, his journey into recovery, and hopefully we'll get some wonderful insights that are going to help those people out there that are sober curious and thinking about how they might attain recovery. So welcome. Great to see you.
Thank you, Johnny. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. We've been talking about this for a while, haven't we?
We have, yeah.
And it's nice to actually have you on the sofa now and talking to you in person. We've had a great chat already off mic, so hopefully we're going to be able to... you're going to be happy to share some of those insights, really. So,
divulge a few things.
Yeah, well, of course.
Not too many, of course.
No, you've got to keep some back.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you could start by just introducing yourself, who you are, what you're about, that'd be really good.
So my name's Stuart, Derbyshire. I'm originally from Nottingham. Grew up on a council estate, typical upbringing. Got to the age of about 12. Become curious in sort of the fairer sex and alcohol and smoking weed and music. Oasis were around at the time, and it seemed like the dumb thing to do. If I go into that, is that all right?
Of course it is.
Yeah, so I don't know, Train Spotting was a big film in the time, in the 90s. I remember watching it with a few friends, and one of my friends' dad says, you shouldn't be watching that, that's glorifying drugs. And I just thought, how does that glorify anything? Little did I know it actually had such a massive impact on my life. And then moving on from that, I came to Sheffield 3 years ago to come to rehab, and this is where I've done my recovery ever since.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, it's great, and you're a great asset to Sheffield.
Thank you.
And the recovery community. And just going back to Train Spotting and films, I think films really define people's lives, and particularly films like Scarface, Train Spotting that were around at that time, did glorify drug use and money and all of that. And I think I can say that such films certainly had an impact on my using career. Yeah, let's say that. Yeah. So you find yourself in Sheffield. Yep. You're working in the drug and alcohol space. Yep. And your primary purpose is to do what?
To engage people in recovery, or as it's okay, to get them to maintain their using, because maintenance using is what's needed if you can't get into recovery straight away. Because if you're like me, maintenance using become a part of my addiction. I was still in the midst of it. I didn't think recovery was possible. So obviously I just needed that support, that treatment, and then eventually something triggers in all of us that experience the awakening of recovery. And I think it's just when you've had enough. You can have the greatest therapists, the greatest counsellors, the greatest treatment. It won't stop you.
No.
Nothing stops you. Only you.
So tell me a little bit about that journey up to the point where you'd had enough. How was it?
Oh, it was awful. Awful. So IV using, running the risk of catching BBVs, a downward spiral. Luckily, prison wasn't my journey, just through complete luck. And I, eventually it was like, what do I do? Do I just keep using, or do I commit suicide? And I think continually using is a version of suicide. So I was suicidal. And then, my life had come crumbling down on me, and I'd had enough, and I just whispered the words to my key worker, I need to go to rehab, and she just shouted from the heavens, like, finally, where have you been? I've been waiting for you. So yeah, then I came to Sheffield.
What a great experience for your key worker and for you.
Yeah, and I learned so much from that experience, and I'm now on the other side of it. So obviously giving back, you know, I do a job now that I absolutely love. It's challenging, massively rewarding. The wins are very little, but it's absolutely worth it. If anyone's got any desire of what recovery is about, and it is possible, you know, you just learn from those that have stuck around and dip your feet in and get stuck in.
I think that's the theme of this podcast today, really, is that recovery is possible. And as I said at the beginning of the podcast, you know, it's Recovery Month, and it's a celebration for everybody, because who's touched by recovery, whether it's, you know, somebody who's been in an addictive cycle, or whether it's a family member or a friend. You know, in my experience of addiction, is that it affected everybody within my orbit. You know, it affected my parents, it affected my friends, it affected my employers, it affected people that I met in public, in bars, in shops. So, you know, and I it wasn't until I found myself in recovery and I was able to actually reflect on that it started to hit home the power of addiction and the impact that it had on me and you know the wider society. So tell me a little bit about how, you know, how old were you when you first picked up a drink or a drug?
So that's an interesting one. So, you know, I was 17 years old literally on my birthday when I first used heroin. But then after being in addiction and unfortunately sticking around in addiction on and off, completely never realising that there is a thing called abstinence, because I thought I'll just swap it and I'll just do a bit of drink and I'll go out partying, and then you end up sniffing cocaine, and then before you know it, you're in someone's kitchen Sunday morning with a needle hanging out your arm. But when I look back and reflect on it now, I realise that going back to sort of the train spotting, and you say about how addiction affects everyone, and I think that's absolutely true, because I was affected by addiction before I'd even become an addict, because I don't think we're born addicts. I think you become one, and you can unlearn the behaviour, but you can't cure addiction. You can put it into remission. So about 12 years old, first joint I ever had, you know, I robbed a bit of weed off my brother's. I did that for ages. So yeah, about 12 years old, and I look back on that now and realise that was what kick-started this thing in my brain that wanted to fix feelings.
That's really interesting. So you're talking there about we can be environments of products of our environment. You know, so what we see, what we hear other people do, we wish to replicate. My experience of that as well was that actually I'm not comfortable with who I am. I don't feel that good about who I am. Sort of suffering with that low self-worth, low self-esteem. And I'm seeing other people seemingly having fun. And so I'm going to try that. And when I do, it lights me up like a Christmas tree. And I'm all of a sudden thinking, I've found the Holy Grail almost. You know, that's my experience.
That external, looking for the external cure to an internal problem. And that's when I realised I was an addict. You know, and I was doing that since the age of 12 with substances. You know,
And when you're in that life and when you're in that world, everybody else is doing what we're doing. So we can normalise it.
Oh, it's absolutely normal.
Justify it and rationalise it. We can almost look outside and go, look at all that lot. They're weird. Why aren't they doing what we do?
Because they're civilians. They can't do it.
Yeah, but at the time, you're just thinking, that's just sad. I remember sitting in a pub once, on numerous occasions actually, and friends who weren't addicts would come in and they'd have a pint and say, right, I'm off home. And I couldn't for the life of me get my head around that and think, why? Because all I wanted to do was get obliterated.
To absolutely obliterate yourself to complete oblivion is if you know, if you suffer with those thoughts and those obsessions, then that's probably why you are what you are. You're an addict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So your experience, lived experience of addiction, helps you connect.
Yeah, it does. Working in the field that I work in, you don't have to have lived experience, and I don't think it's right that everyone that works in services has lived experience. I think that the two combinations of experience and rationale, and then people like us that have got the lived experience and need to be told the rationale on a daily basis, I think it works really well. Yeah, but it is easy to relate to someone, obviously, when you've got that shared experience.
Well, it's that connection, isn't it?
Connection, absolutely.
You know, the connection of somebody, you know, that when we're talking to somebody about our experience and they might be using, and you can see the lights come on.
Yeah.
And like, oh, hang on a minute, there's a glimmer of hope.
Yeah, and it's almost like the 1,000-yard stare, isn't it? It's what is unsaid that can be heard the most. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a feeling. We often talk about working like neck down and getting into the heart space and getting into the feeling space, because addiction sits between our ears, my understanding of it, and it's in my thoughts, you know, and it's in that paranoia, it's in that resentment and anger and frustration and all of that stuff. And
should we, let's cut to the cloth, and there it is, resentment. There's the big one. Big one. Yeah.
Do you feel resentment fueled your addiction?
Yeah, absolutely. I resent to this day, and I work on that continually. You know, maybe there's nothing I can do about that. I can't change that, but I can obviously work on that, on the here and now, and keep it in the present, you know. Yeah, resentment.
I just want to go back to something you were talking about earlier, and that moment with your key worker.
Yeah.
Because that's stuck around with me since you said it.
Yeah.
And there was a resounding yes from you, and you wanted help. Just talk to me about, because I think this is really important for the listeners, that those other times where you will have sat in front of your key worker, I imagine, and they're trying to connect with you and reach you, and you were unreachable. Just tell me a little bit about what was going on for you then, because I think there's a lot of fear knocking about, isn't there, in addiction?
Yeah, it's the unknown, isn't it? You can't experience recovery without the addiction from a substance misuse point of view. And the connection it grew legs, and it was going to have me down jail institutions or death. That was where I was heading. So I thought, right, the other two don't sound too appealing. I'll probably go to an institution. That's, you know, and that was my concept of it. You know, I felt resentful of friends that had gone to rehab in like their early 20s, and they'd sorted their lives out, and I completely didn't understand it. You know, the principle around whichever sort of residential rehab you go to, whatever recovery works for you, then that's fantastic. But their kind of journeys was sort of a holy nature, and that put me off, because God's a discouraging word to most people. And then eventually I just thought, I need to give it a try. I have to. You know, the other two options aren't so great. So, and I learned then what I know now is that no matter what gets said to you, it's you that has to say that, you know, you have to give the answer to the question. If the question's no, it's not happening for you, is it? You know.
Yeah, you can only have your own experience with it. You know, there has to be that internal shift.
Yeah.
I liken it to an awakening, you know, an awakening of the spirit, a reconnection with self that says, actually, do you know what? I've had enough of this. I remember I was so scared of stopping because I didn't know what was waiting for me on the other side. And that kept me locked in a cycle of sort of negative thoughts and behaviours and drinking and using for a lot longer than it probably should have done. Fear.
Yeah, or fear, yeah. The unknown. That's what we fear.
Yeah.
You can't fear the fact that it's happened.
No.
Can't be fearful, can it?
Well,
the fear is that it might happen again. That hasn't happened, so it's the unknown that we fear of.
I like the acronym: face everything and recover, or fuck everything and run.
Yeah, it's scary facing it, isn't it? So yeah.
Well, it's a big deal, isn't it?
Massive deal.
You know, because, you know, if you think about how it was and our lives were active addiction. So all of a sudden, somebody's asking us to step out of the comfort zone right, into a new space without the only thing that actually helped us calibrate and normalise and self-regulate. So somebody's telling you to stop, do that, come over here with me, and you're going to be all right. Hang on.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be all right, so I'm not going just yet. That was my thinking. Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage, doesn't it?
100%. Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage.
Yeah. And a lot of people need that metaphorical hand holding. And the reasons you come into recovery do not matter. The reasons you stay do.
Yeah,
That's it. You know, if you need that, you know, we'll love you till you learn to love yourself.
Yeah.
And that's been my experience, and that's a lovely, lovely thing. And I adopt that from the principles that and I still to this day I'm learning, but it's a great principle to take in your life anyway, you know.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. And the impact that new way of living can have on, you know, we talked about the ripple effect of addiction and the negativity. Actually, the ripple effect of recovery and positivity can flow out.
Yeah.
You know, it comes from within, but it can then flow out into the community.
Yeah.
And help people, because it's connection, isn't it?
Yeah. 100%.
You know.
Yeah.
I think it was Johan Hari that said, addiction is isolation and recovery is connection. And that initial piece is vital for somebody like you to connect with somebody who's, I'll use the word again, but, you know, recovery curious.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
To be able to listen to you speak from your heart and speak your truth about your experience, and for them to like say, wow.
I identify with that.
I identify, he's done it. Maybe I can.
Yeah.
How? You know, how do we do it? You know.
It's a great question. Yeah.
It is a great question, and it's a big
is.
question.
Yeah.
And it would probably come out during the next 15 minutes as we continue to talk. So, in terms of your life now,
Yeah.
in recovery,
Yeah.
let's talk about some of the positives that recovery gives.
Recovery gives you your life. Without recovery, I do not have the life I lead now. I would still be miserable. I'd still be suicidal. I'd still be financially completely unstable. God knows where it would have took me, and it will eventually take you to, you know, it will obliterate you and take you to your final resting place, sorry. My life's wonderful now. I've got so much going off. I've got the job that fulfills me. I've regained physical health. Well-being is fantastic. I'm mentally well. I'm spiritually gaining such a greater understanding, and it's taken me to places that I didn't envision, I didn't think were possible. My life's wonderful. It's not perfect, because perfection is something that we struggle with as addicts, and if you're looking for it, you'll be looking for a very long time. But it's content. Yeah.
I like that. I love that.
Yeah.
It's so great to hear that. You know, that's such a positive, reinforcing message that, you know, it's not perfect, but it's a damn sight better than it was. And you alluded to that progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
You know, we can strive for perfection, at the same time as giving ourselves lashings.
Yeah. Because we don't deserve it anyway, do we?
We don't deserve it. So I remember somebody said to me when I walked through the doors of rehab, he said, "Johnny, you're a really lucky lad." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because you've only got to change one thing." And I said, "Great, what's that?" He said, "Everything."
There it is. It's only one thing.
It's everything. And I'm like, oh my God, that sounds too much for me. He said, "But you've only got to do it a day at a time."
Yeah.
24 hours, that's all you got to do. 24-hour chunks of this.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, you'll be all right.
Yeah. And did you find that was the case?
Yeah.
Day at a time?
Yeah, a day at a time.
Yeah.
I mean, my journey was I went into rehab, I came out, I stayed sober for a number of years, and then I relapsed, and my relapse took me back out for 3 years. You know, people talk about not having enough pain. I don't think it's that. I think it was I'm in so much pain still that I've just not managed to get to the resolution and the bottom of it.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about resentment and things like that. I think I was still harbouring that and trauma.
Yeah.
that hadn't been dealt with, and you know, I used on my feelings.
Absolutely, every time.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I can use on any feeling. Happiness, sadness, you know, don't matter where it is in the spectrum. I can commemorate, can celebrate, and I can do that with, you know, complete relapse in mind.
Yeah.
It fascinates me when people say, oh, you know, I haven't got another relapse in me. You have. You've got breath in your lungs. Everyone's got another relapse in them, and that's what I've learned. I need to realise. But what you might not have is another recovery. You know, that's what you've got to remember. And that's why you have to keep it in the day. You know, you're absolutely right. One more day, one day at a time.
Yeah. And you can even do it like an hour at a time.
You can, yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's about having the right people around you.
Definitely,
you know,
yeah.
The work that you do every day, you know, I see that, and I see people, you know, that you work with who are gaining recovery and hope.
Yeah.
From you and your colleagues and the work that you're doing there in the community, and it's just awesome. And it's like we've got to remain as that beacon of hope for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what this is about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Recovery is possible.
So if you've got somebody sat in this room today, or somebody's listening, and they're saying to you, Stu, I've had enough, what would you be saying to them?
I'm not surprised. I had enough as well. You know, let's get down to the nitty gritty. If you've had enough, then why don't you give something else a try? You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm not going to give up on no one I'm sat in a room with, because I know it's possible. So I just ask them why they're prepared to do that.
Brilliant.
Simple.
Well, that's it. And this month is all about sharing that. It's all about sharing that experience, sharing that hope, lending somebody our courage.
Yeah.
To be able to take that next step.
Yeah,
that little step can seem so big and impossible. But when you've got people around you, like-minded folk, you know, anything's possible.
Anything's possible, definitely.
Great.
Definitely.
Awesome. Right. Well, Stu, it's been awesome. I've really appreciated you coming in. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your experience, and I hope everybody's enjoyed the podcast. And please do share, and I hope to see you again soon, and we'll do something again.
Lovely.
All right.
Look forward to it. Thank you very much.